Hello, this is part 2 of a 3D Studio Max tutorial on building a phone booth. The purpose of this is to simply show a few techniques, not to finish out the model, but rather just reinforce some of the topics that we've covered in the CG 225 class. With the booth that we started, I'm going to bring up the back wall that was done and pull that up a little bit. Since it is still a box primitive, I can pull in the sides, make sure they still stick in. If I want to, I can color it the same. I can actually select all of these and give them a reddish color. Alright, to adjust this a little bit based on the reference, I'm going to, even though I'm in perspective mode, I can bring this down a little bit, and I'm going to go to front view, F, Z, and I'll select those vertices there and bring those down to fit the door like that. Okay, FZ. Also, what I can do is either adjust the door, I think I'll do that, or I can adjust the sides. I'll adjust the door. I'll select, I will marquee and use Control key to get the other two. So if I hit F3, you can see I have the outer ones selected. And now, just to make the door a little bit wider, I can scale those like that. F3. Okay. So this original back panel is a little high, but this is because I want to add the piece that says telephone on the top. So I can do this a number of ways. To reduce poly count, it's actually a little easier to make a separate object which will become, or could become, a separate element. So I'll go back to standard primitives and I'll do a box, and I can draw it anywhere. And in this case, I'll make it about 40 by 40 by, let's say, 8. With the transform type in, I can very easily move it into the center to be aligned with everything else. And simply because it's still available, I can easily change the width and height to make this little piece that's going to say telephone. Now that's very low poly, and what I wanted to do is add the word telephone here. So I will start the material editor, and as far as which mode I use the compact material editor as opposed to the slate material editor. I prefer the compact one. If you want to change the number of swatches here, you can go to 5 by 3, 3 by 2, whatever you wish. Find an empty slot, usually not the first one. That's better to leave that one blank. And what I'm going to do is build a multi-subobject material by clicking standard and then multi-subobject. This doesn't matter too much because I haven't done anything with the original material, but I'll discard it just to keep it clean, and I'll set the number to 2. For most of the piece here, I will make it solid red. So I will choose standard, and I'll make the diffuse color a red color. And I'll go back to the parent. So material 36, which is not the best name, is my ID1 material. To change that name, I can sweep over material number 36 and just hit red, go back to the parent. I can change the default name to phone booth top. It's highly recommended that you do not use spaces in names, so use underscores preferably. To get the second one started, I will click on None and click on Standard, and under Maps I will add a bitmap under the diffuse channel. So I'll go to bitmap and I will find the map that I need. There's the telephone map, and you can click on this button here to get a better feel for what that looks like. You can also double click this swatch and you can get a large version of the material sample. Now ID2 has the telephone map. Notice that there is an M now next to the diffuse channel. And what I want to do is put the word telephone here on the sides, but leave other parts of it red. So I will do that next. I'll just put the material on to the object. ID1 is red, ID2 is the telephone JPEG. Go to Parent. So with that item selected, I can click on Assign Material to Selection. For the telephone text, I want to click this button here, Show Standard Map in Viewport. I'm going to close the material editor, and I'm going to go to the Modify panel to add and edit poly modifier. Because I'm going to make a unique top, I do not need that face. I'm going to do Alt-Q. I do not need this face either, for it will be hidden. What I would like to do is to inset faces. So I'm going to select these. I'll make sure each of these is selected and choose Inset by Polygon and increase this amount a little bit. Now what I will do next is click Check, select all these faces by marqueing everything, set my ID to 1, and then here set my ID to 2. I'm using the Control key to select multiple faces. I have 4 polygons selected. Set that ID to 2. And you'll see that automatically I do have mapping coordinates for this box, but they're not quite set to the way I would like to see them. So I'll add a UVW map modifier. I can edit the gizmo by turning the gizmo. The little stick on top of the box represents the top of the map. The green line represents the right side. And you can see that I can get the word telephone to read correctly on one side, which is not sufficient. I could do this for each side and continue to do one set of faces, map it, collapse it, add a UVW map, map it, collapse it, and so forth. Or I can try the box modifier and make sure that the amount all around is correct, is the same. So the way that box modifier works, I'm successful in getting 2 of the sides mapped like I want them. So what I'll do is leave it like that and reinforce the idea that we covered in class about selecting faces, adding a UVW map, positioning the gizmo as needed, collapsing it, and then repeating that. So we'll do that here, but with a box modifier. So I will scale that down, and we'll go to the top level and right click and collapse. Now I will select just the 2 faces here, 2 faces, and I will add a UVW map, make it a box map. I think I had 38 in there, so it's a box all the way around. Notice the small square here shows that I have a sub selection of all the faces, and the UVW map is only applied to those faces. In this case, there are 2 polygons selected. I will turn that gizmo. Actually, the gizmo is working just fine. I will scale the gizmo 85% like I did the other ones to make them even, and now I have what I need. That is sufficient for this part of the tutorial. And now I'll do the top piece and then do a couple other items to reinforce the topics that we have covered. I'll make a box for the top, and in this case I'll make sure that I draw it the same size as before, 42, 42, and we'll do 10 inches. I will put that in the center and then bring it to the top, and I will try to mimic the shape that is in the reference. And in this case I will up the segments. So I can achieve this, I will increase the height, and next I will add a FFD 4x4x4 freeform deformation modifier, FFD, and I'll go to the sub level control points, and I'll just get these 4 control points and I'll pull them up. I can get these 4 control points and pull them down. I can get more control points using the control key. You can see I have, this is yellow, it's selected, this is amber, it's not selected. 7, 8, there's no indication on how many you have, so you have to visually keep track of that. And that is the approximate shape that I'd like to achieve. So that's a freeform deformation modifier on top of a segmented box. I'll go to the top level and I will collapse. There's really no reason to have this part here, so it's not too difficult to do a ring selection. Let's do it, edit poly, so I can get the ring selection ability, and collapse those faces there. Same can be done here, but if I collapse them, it won't quite be what I'd like to see. But that's pretty easy to fix. What you can do is select all those vertices, F3, to show you that I've selected the whole bottom, and I can scale them to 0. Scale to 0. Now I wouldn't want to do it here. That would be wrong. I'd want to hold this down and go to non-uniform scale and right click on Z. It looks like my selection wasn't quite what I wanted. I'll redo that, right click, and that is what I am after. So to reduce poly count, let's do Alt Q, F3. I will select these 16 because we will never see them, and exit isolation mode, W, and I'll bring that down there. So of course from here we can do lots of editing, lowering the poly count and so forth. I wanted to give you an idea on how to get that shape started. You can do things like collapse edges on the bottom there to make it more simple, but also you can do a extrude to make an indentation. So I can start with a bevel, kind of keep it at the same distance. A bevel is a two-part process, and then drag and click again, and then use extrude to extrude in. Now, like I mentioned, I'd want a simpler geometry down here. If I wanted to do that type of a shape, you can go here and collapse those edges to make your shape more simple. Alright, so let's cover a couple other topics. Again, not trying to finish the booth, but rather get a few topics reviewed. I'm going to move that pivot point, because now if I were to try to edit the door, it would rotate, interestingly, from the center, because we edited it from the center from a larger box before. Right click to cancel. So under the third create modify hierarchy, under the third panel, I can move the pivot point exactly where I want it. I use my W, my E, and my R keys on the keyboard to move that pivot point right where I want it. It doesn't really matter where that is on the Z-axis. I think you get the point there. And now if I rotate, I'm out of effect pivot only mode. The door works like it is supposed to. The other thing I wanted to show you was for us to be able to take this door and turn it into one of the sides. And so if I double click, let's get back to the create panel, which just to get out of the hierarchy panel. Double click, I select all the children of the parent. And so what I'll do now is I will shift drag and make a copy. Actually, I'll make an instance, and I will get rid of this piece. Notice that the hierarchy is maintained. I will rotate this on the Z-axis 90 degrees and slide it into position. And move these bars. Now if I change the shape of the bar, it'll change those as well. But it looks like from the reference I have a couple different types of reference, and it's just kind of interesting to me if this was to be moved over. So negative 3.25, I'm looking right here. So negative 3.25 and 3.25. Now if I can't hit that exactly how I want it, I can right click and cancel, and I can do that. I can type in the value. Now double click that parent, shift drag, and I have another instance that's essentially the same, and I can put that into place. Now if I wanted it to be perfectly lined up, then I should just shift drag it this way. Alright, so what I'll do now is I'll click on the door I'll click on P for perspective. I will use my same navigation tools to move myself around. And now I'll just show you how to add a camera, position the perspective view just like I want it. Control C, perspective changes to camera. If you were to go to top view, you'd see that we now have a camera icon pointing at the phone booth. C for camera, Control R, and I can rotate around. As soon as I put the camera target in the middle of the booth, hit C, now Control R allows me to rotate around the telephone booth. That ends part 2, and as always, please send me questions if you have them. Thank you.